Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rach, and I'm joined today with my guest, Benjamin Rosenbaum, author of Dream Apart. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Rach. Great to be here.
So how long have you been playing Powered by the Apocalypse games?
I think I found Apocalypse World not long after it came out, so quite a while ago. And I read it and it was kind of a revelation. I sort of felt like this had systematized things I'd been yearning for a long time.
So your gateway was the original Apocalypse World.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your first playbook?
I think I emceed the first game that I ran. I think that's my first playbook. When I ended up playing it was the Operator, which I guess is gone in the new version, but everybody's an operator now.
I was just going to say, everyone's an operator, and everyone has gigs now.
Yeah, but that was a funny game because I emceed one game, and then we actually went back in time, and somebody else emceed a prequel of that game. And so I was playing an operator who was at this point kind of a flawed, but in the prequel was a flawed but decent guy, but we knew was going to end up being this complete villain in the later game. So
that sounds totally tragic.
Yeah. It was like we were heading towards like this, this corruption.
Read a Sitch.
The first segment of the show is Read a Sitch, where we talk about aspects of gameplay at the table. And when we were preparing for this episode, Ben, you had this great topic in mind that you pitched to me.
Yeah, we were talking about how one of the things that I remember being striking about reading the first edition of Apocalypse World was how it inverted some of the conventions of traditional role-playing. I mean, usually, we're used to this sort of band of independent travelers who are, on a quest, either a quest of great import, or maybe investigators solving a mystery, or fighting the big bad, or maybe just murder hoboing around, killing things and taking their stuff. But they are, independent. They go off and do something. And many characters of the original playbooks in Apocalypse World are rooted in community, and they're actually people who are NPCs traditionally. Like if you're playing Keep on the Borderlands, back in the day, the lord of the manor that you go and staying at, or the innkeeper, or the, somebody who goes and maybe makes deals and gets stuff, a merchant, or the courtesan, or the innkeeper. Those are like the sort of stock NPCs who are going to give you plot tokens. And your characters who are wandering around having adventures are independent of them. But in Apocalypse World, the Maestro D and the Hardholder and the Skinner, all these people are very much like tied to a community and have this deep, dense thicket of relationships, and they're not necessarily going anywhere. They have the tavern where cliche is that the adventurers meet there is actually the Maestro D's, like, that's the thing they're defending. And so there's a lot more suddenly at stake and a lot of really rooted relationships.
Do you feel this presents challenges to role players who come in with certain assumptions about how a game is supposed to roll, and then you give them these, here's the types of characters you can play, and then they're firmly anchored. They have stuff they can't walk away from. Responsibilities.
Yeah. I think probably intentionally, I would guess, the original Apocalypse World set of playbooks kind of has a little of both. So there's definitely like the driver the sex move of the driver almost makes fun of the idea that the driver doesn't want to make any connections and is running away from commitment and connection. So you have that, even though it's a little tongue-in-cheek, and then you have other characters who are really very, very rooted. And I think it does present challenges, but also opportunities. It's sort of exciting to suddenly play these characters who have this sense of connection. And often in Apocalypse World, there's almost a sense of confinement. Often one of the scarcities is a scarcity of room. Like you're kind of pushed up against each other and there's not that much stuff and you're fighting over what stuff there is one typical format of Apocalypse World games, which I think is interesting compared to a lot of sort of like we go slay the dragon and get the horde approaches.
Yeah, there's no, we're going to go on a structured adventure through a dungeon, and what we do in room A isn't really going to matter in room B as long as we get all the loot from it and we left no one behind.
Right.
As opposed to, we're going to have a story in this closed community, and there's going to be lasting repercussions for the way we treat other PCs and other NPCs, because the status quo isn't going to be a status quo, but people should have memory
Right. Everything matters. The play is happening off screen. Everything has repercussions. So all of your actions have these ripple effects. And that is magnified by it being a small, dense kind of community where you're not just going off to the next room or the next land or whatever. You having to live with your messes. And that also that idea of being a fan of the characters and letting them win, but then confronting them with the consequences of winning. Which, be careful what you wish for is really, I think, a typical theme that comes out in a lot of, early Apocalypse play and discussion about it, which I just found riveting, this sense of psychological realism and of things mattering, and also of humanizing. Like, there's a humanizing of all the characters, and, so nobody is just dispensing plot tokens. No NPCs can just sort of be screwed over, and there's no consequences to that. Everything has these ripple effects, and that's, I think, part of that's an agenda that's implicit in Apocalypse World, is making these everybody human.
I think this is a great moment to bring this back to Dream Askew and Dream Apart, which are games that focus on the community and the role of all the players in the community, to the point where the different players, not only are they playing their characters, but also elements of the community as well.
That thing that it was implicit in Apocalypse World from the beginning, I think that these games kind of take that and turn it up to 11. They're very much games of community and of exploration of these relationships inside of community. And also, it's a small community in the shadow of kind of a bigger community. So there's a world which is sort of has wild and dangerous parts, and also parts that are sort of consolidated and hegemonic and a little bit opposed to the little community we're talking about. And then there's that little community and its internal tensions and struggles. So everybody's very rooted, in a sense. There's a lot to defend, kind of initially in the setup of the game.
Great. Let's go to the next segment of the show, Open Your Brain, where we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of Dream Apart.
Great.
Open your brain.
Ben, what's your pitch for Dream Apart?
Well, Dream Apart is a game of the fantastical Jewish history. So it's set in the 19th century in Eastern Europe, in the shtetl, which is kind of a setting we know from Fiddler on the Roof and Yentl and Golems and Dybbuk's and that kind of thing, and folktales, but realistically what was happening then, like the actual historical setting and the kind of folkloric view of it. It's a game about a community which is embattled, in the sense that it is, under a lot of pressure from, there are pogroms, there is anti-Semitism, but also has a lot of like agency and connection and can be a great place to be. And it's also, full of spirits and angels and demons and a very sort of different cosmology and worldview than a lot of fantasy role-playing. I grew up, playing D&D and that kind of tradition, reading Tolkien, and then at the same time, very much connected to this Jewish tradition, which has kind of a different take on the fantastic. There's very little of a great war between the good and the bad, and the pure good will win and conquer the Dark Lord. There's much more moral complexity in this world, where there's a lot of like deep mystery about why things happen, and the heroes are usually, they're not running around with a sword killing the dragon. They're tricksters and survivors. And that is somewhere between Bugs Bunny and Lovecraft relationship to the cosmos is something very deep in me and that I didn't necessarily see in fantasy role-playing, which I love. And so I wanted to have that come alive. That kind of irony and wistfulness and grit and survivor trickster mentality.
What would you say are your biggest media inspirations for listeners who are interested in Dream Apart and not quite sure where to begin to introduce themselves into this style of fantasy role-playing?
Well, Isaac Bashevis Singer is a major text. So, and the one everybody knows is Yentl is from an Isaac Bashevis Singer story. But there's also a lot of fantastical stuff. There's a lot of, demons hiding in mirrors, seducing the wayward wives. And there's a wit and irony and gleeful whimsy in Singer. There's also a lot of sort of that era. I mean, Sholem Aleichem is what we know, Fiddler on the Roof from. That's the Tevye the Dairyman stories. But there's also stuff like, there's some more modern things. I love there's a comic book called How Mirka Got Her Sword, which is actually not set in the past. It's set in sort of some Orthodox Jewish community somewhere, but it's very much in the world of Jewish fantasy. That's a recent graphic novel series. And the Dybbuk, which is Ansky, is the classic sort of Dybbuk story. A Dybbuk is a spirit that goes and possesses people. I think there was a movie about that recently, but anyway, I wish there was more. There's a certain amount of it. Oh, the Rabbi's Cat and Klezmer. There's some European comics that are on in the same theme. The Rabbi's Cat there was a film of recently that's actually in the sort of North African world, but there's the same author whose name I forget did something set in the Ashkenazi world of the northern European Jewish world as well, called Klezmer. So there's a French-Canadian rapper called So-Called who's very who's like a Jewish klezmer. It's like klezmer rap, which sounds terrible, but it's actually pretty clever and interesting.
That's like a great mediography of here's where you start to kind of get a sense of the expectations for this type of game, or this game specifically. Mm-hmm. Now let's focus on the game itself. What makes Dream Apart different from the other Powered by the Apocalypse games out on the market right now?
Dream Apart is a hack of Dream Askew, and the two of them I think are mechanically different than a lot of the rest of the Apocalypse World engines, although they very much take from Apocalypse World. But Dream Askew keeps the Apocalypse World setting in many ways, although it queers it, and it hacks the mechanics, and Dream Apart follows on from that. The main thing it's revolutionizing, I think, is the role of what the player does and what the MC does. First of all, it's GM-less or MC-less in the sense that everybody takes on a different aspect of MCing the world. And also, there's no dice. It's a token-based system. And so you essentially have a defined set of strong moves, normal moves, and weak moves, which are kind of correspond to, what would happen on a 10 plus, what would happen on a 7 to 9, and what would happen on a 6 and under. But you're making your own sort of narrative decisions proactively together about what happens when. The way it works is you get a token for making a weak move. You have to spend a token in order to make a strong move, and you don't start with any tokens. So that means that you don't start with the capacity of rolling a 10 up. You begin by having to fail, or at least, get in trouble or expose yourself or create vulnerabilities in interesting ways. It's not necessarily straightforwardly failing. So, there are characters in Dream Apart for whom falling in love is a weak move. But it's somehow doing a weak move is something that gets your character in a pickle, drives the plot forward, creates the opportunity for danger and trouble. But in some ways, it's almost like you're making a hard move against yourself when you choose a weak move to make. So in that sense, it's mechanically very different, although in a lot of the agendas and principles, it's very much in the spirit of Apocalypse World.
Fantastic. When we were talking about strong moves and weak moves, what would you say are your two favorites? Your favorite strong move and your favorite weak move in the game?
That's a great question. I am fond of how the in love moves work. For different characters, falling in love has different consequences. There aren't sex moves in Dream Apart. Love is much more at issue. Being in love in the shtetl is kind of a catastrophe, right? We live in an age in which being in love seems very nice in Disney and Hollywood, but in a culture with arranged marriages, being in love is a big threat. It essentially means that you may be miserable if you do the thing that your family and your community wants you to do because your heart has somehow, been set on something else, which may be something that, is completely inappropriate because it's actually, there's a lot of strictures about who you can marry and how and so on, or who you can be with. So I try to capture the characters based on, what that means for them. So for instance, for the Matchmaker, it's a weak move to fall in love, and while in love, they desperately avoid doing anything that will dismay their beloved. The Klezmer, similarly, it's a weak move to fall in love, and the Klezmer does foolish, desperate things to win or impress their beloved. Those are troublesome. Whereas the midwife, who's a much more centered person, it's actually a strong move to fall in love. When the midwife falls in love, they see keenly and compassionately their beloved's true nature. So I guess I'll pick those because I think that they're interestingly evocative of the characters.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to re-examine the role of sex moves or intimacy moves or specials or whatever your game calls them by making them have that mechanical detriment and benefit. It's, like I said, it's very evocative, particularly with the Matchmaker, who is one of the character types and someone who is so centered around building these relationships and struggles to have them themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Which brings me to another interesting thought I had about the game when I was reading through, is that some of the roles, to me, in my own personal experiences in Western society, they seem a little gendered, but you could play any gender that you want in Dream Apart.
Yeah, Sagas of the Icelanders is another influence, and I really like how Sagas of the Icelanders did this very bold thing in looking at a traditionally gendered society and talking about the things that men and women did, and not having this world in which anybody could do anything necessarily, but a world in which everybody was at parity in terms of agency. And I wanted to draw from that, and at the same time, there's all this stuff in the source literature, in Yiddish literature, about people transgressing those roles and inverting them. And I mean, Yentl being the obvious example, where somebody who is goes off to be a scholar. So you have the option to be a scholar or a soldier, even if the character is female or gendered female by the shtetl. But, one of the skills you have as the soldier is, passing as male. So it's there were contexts in which women were soldiers. If you were a soldier in the Tsar's army, you probably weren't out as a woman doing that. But if you were a revolutionary, if you were one of the Polish, if you ran off to join the Polish nationalist insurgents, it's entirely possible that you could have been a woman doing that. And similarly, there certainly were men who were matchmakers, and a man who is a midwife, maybe they're an amateur surgeon, somebody who does the healthcare in the shtetl and is derisively called a midwife by their peers. So it's definitely, some of these roles are more transgressive for one another gender, but I want to leave room for that to happen. And at the same time, I really wanted a balance between roles that are traditionally male, the scholar and the soldier and so on, that we think of as men's power, and of things like the matchmaker and the midwife, who wield social power and other kinds of power and that kind of parity.
So that brings us to our next segment, Act Under Fire, where we're going to play a small slice of what a Dream Apart game could look like at your table.
Awesome.
It is time to act under fire.
Now, Ben, as you've discussed, Dream Apart is structured a little bit differently than other Powered by the Apocalypse games because of the lack of MC, correct?
Yeah.
Can you describe to our listeners the different roles and sharing of parts of the setting that are going to occur?
Yeah, exactly. So thanks. So everybody has a character, which is more like a typical playbook. You might be the matchmaker or the midwife or the sorcerer or the soldier. And everybody also has an aspect of the setting. So there are 6 playbooks. There's also 6 aspects of the setting. And each of those aspects of the setting is you have your MC hat on. So if you are playing the Wild Forest, then you're thinking about ways in which the Wild Forest can tempt the characters into it, that NPCs can be expressing things from the Wild Forest or, discoveries from the Wild Forest or something. And when people enter into the Wild Forest, you're playing its denizens. If you're playing the texts and traditions as your role, then you're looking for ways that those things are going to constrain characters or force them into moral or ethical or decisions or bring into relief issues of modernity versus tradition, or should we be doing this? So there's not sole ownership by one person over an NPC. Somebody might take on that NPC if at that moment it's expressing something that's part of the setting element that they're portraying. And the general rule is you don't want to talk to yourself. So if you're playing the Wild Forest, but your character enters the Wild Forest, then you give that setting element away. So always stay with your character, but you sort of trade off the setting elements depending on what's going on, so that everybody is embodying one of the important factors of the world that's interacting with the players.
So what are the 2 pieces of the setting we're going to be starting with tonight?
We are going to start with the unseen world, which is the world of spirits and demons and angels and ghosts, which is something that influences the life of people in the shtetl. Everyone hears its whispers, although everyone isn't maybe paying attention or conscious of them, but it's tempting, potentially comforting, and so on. Interacts with everybody. And then also gossip and reputation, which is something that's very much alive in the shtetl, and which is a source of lots of trouble. And, reputation is a crucial economy in the shtetl. It's, arguably it's more of a reputation economy than a money economy. Rich or poor is one thing, but if your reputation is ruined in the shtetl, that has serious consequences.
And the 2 characters we'll be playing tonight?
I will be playing Zussman, the matchmaker, and you will be playing Golda, the soldier.
Yes, the romantic and open soldier who has the abilities to drink heavily and pass for a man.
Yep. So the soldier in this game is somebody who essentially either ran away to join the army or was drafted into the army, but served off in this very non-Jewish world of the Tsarist army, and then has come back to the shtetl and is sort of estranged from it. Whereas the matchmaker is very much somebody who's sort of juggling all the expectations of the shtetl and in the thick of it.
I'm really excited to see where we go with these characters. So, Ben, how do we set a scene in this game?
When we talked about in the beginning, we looked at a whole bunch of different elements when we were generating the characters, and actually something that I guess we didn't do is to look at the shtetl itself, because that's also part of the setup that you think about the blessings and curses. So maybe we should actually just take a moment and decide, each pick like a blessing and a curse that's in the shtetl, so that we know we have a little more grist from the mill. Do you want to go ahead and pick a blessing?
I think fellowship is a good blessing. That's a good place to start with, is our community has like feelings of belonging together.
That sounds good. And I think that we should also have friends among the peasants, the non-Jewish peasants outside the shtetl, that we have some allies there. And then let's pick some curses. So I think false accusations.
I love plague personally, but that's my own experiences.
Excellent. False accusations, plague, and perhaps something monstrous. So given that we've got that going on, and then we also talked a little bit when we were drawing up the thing about relationships. I believe my son's face may have stolen your heart. My son, who has been drafted by the Tsar, the Matchmaker's son, Avram. And so I'm Avram's father, Zusman, and I have a secret love story with Lev the blacksmith, which is not something the shtetl would approve of.
Oh no.
So we have that, and we have the blessings and curses. So, let's think about what that could give us. Well, you said you were interested in plague. So,
yes.
we have plague and false accusations. So it may be that we've been accused of causing the plague. The shtetl, that there are rumors among we have friends among the peasants, so possibly they come to warn us that we've been accused of this, that there's danger of, that there'll be arrests and accusations and so on.
Yeah, I definitely think we might be opening with a meeting where we're trading notes. Mm-hmm. And we're going to reveal a little bit of our character's secrets, maybe?
That sounds good. Yeah. Oh, and you're still passing as a man. Is that true?
It is one of my abilities.
Since you've returned to the shtetl, have you returned to your original female persona, or are you still passing as a male in front of the shtetl?
I definitely think I'm still passing, because one of the ideas that was put forth in the soldier playbook is how you return from being the outsider to becoming part of the community, or if you follow through with that at all.
Yeah. Okay, so how about it? So I guess it sounds like you and I are meeting. You have an agenda because you've fallen in love with Avram, but that's not going to work out unless you reveal your true nature.
Oh, definitely. What is a space the Matchmaker has for these sort of secret meetings? The ones that would normally occur between parents who are trying to arrange marriages?
Yeah, I think that the Matchmaker lives in a small house off, not far from the market, and that Zusman the Matchmaker has a parlor. It's a small house. There's a kitchen and a parlor, but the parlor is as prettied up as Zusman can afford, because that is where Zusman entertains the various families when they come to try to make a match. So I guess you've come to meet me there.
Oh, definitely.
Great. Well, we'll keep an eye on our moves. We noticed that we have to make regular and weak moves at the moment because we don't have any tokens. So we'll look for opportunities to get those. And I guess we should go ahead and play that scene.
So if Dream Apart, do we announce when we make our moves?
You don't have to, but it's a good idea to at least let people see that you're spending a token, gaining a token. I mean, I often like to announce them if that doesn't break the mood, but at least to clarify sort of like what's going on. I think when you spend a token, you want people to know, oh, okay, that is something where now you actually can achieve that thing that you paid for. Similarly, when you gain a token, you want to signal them like how this is, what is the hard move you're making against yourself. So certainly you to do it, you have to do it. So you don't want to just baldly announce the name of the move, but I think it's good to kind of signal to people like, okay, this is a weak move. This is where, one of my schemes is going terribly awry, for instance.
Fantastic.
Let me ask you one question. Before we jump in there, which is, what are so you're haunted by the moment before the blast. I feel like there's somebody who you lost in the course of being away and in the war.
Yes, my sort of brother in arms, Sasha. We had this moment of respite and peace. And it's those moments that Golda fears now, because it reminds her so much of that moment before the blast where Sasha essentially went from being a person to not being a person gets completely obliterated. In her experiences in the war before, I mean, if you shot someone, if you stabbed someone, it left the body behind. But the idea of an explosion and then maybe only traces of what a human is being left, that blew her mind, for lack of any better description. She hasn't quite gotten over it.
Right. She also got 3 pounds of shrapnel in her body at the same time, I believe.
Yep.
Right. Great. And that might have had something to do with the hard drinking as well.
It takes pain away.
All right. Let's just go ahead and start. So, Golda. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. What name are you going by? Because I don't know that you're Golda yet.
Let's go with, I believe, Beer is one of the male ones listed on the soldier sheet.
Great. So, Bear, yes, you've come back to the shtetl, is that right? I don't, have you been here before? You've been back a few weeks, I understand.
Yes, I came as soon as I was relieved of my position.
Yes. Do you have any news? Because we've heard terrible rumors.
Oh, you know rumors. You know, peasants pass back and forth ideas all the time. Claims of monsters and creatures beyond comprehension. I mean, once you're out on the front lines, all those stories, there's children's folk tales, right?
Certainly. So, what have you come to see me about? Is there a match you want to make? A young man like yourself. Even though you were a soldier, which is not necessarily the best thing, and I don't know much about your family, but perhaps something can be done.
Matchmaker, I have a question to ask of you.
Yes?
Your son, why did you let him become enlisted by the Tsar? So, I'm trying to trigger my weak move. Demand an explanation from someone.
Excellent. So, well, you take a token. I'm going to take umbrage with this. Let him. What do you expect me to do? What do you expect me to defy the garrison? I don't want him to be drafted by the Tsar any more than anyone does. I appealed to the council, but did they listen to me?
Well, evidently not, but you don't understand the horrors that await your son out there. There's much better places he could be.
Are you serious? You come into my house and criticize at a time of such tragedy for me? What are you thinking?
And Golda slams her hands down on the table. And I think this is the moment where you always have that dramatic, pulling the hair that was tied up down. And it sort of reveals more of her feminine features. She looks at him and says, your son's eye caught me from across the marketplace. And I can't even begin to imagine what's going to happen to him. You must make a match between him and I.
But what are you telling me between him and you? What nonsense is this?
I'm Golda. Don't you remember back when I was a child growing up when I used to play and hang out with your son and daughter?
Golda! My God! What have you done? We thought you were lost entirely. You've been living some kind of decadent life? Among the soldiers? I think I'm currently alienating and making enemies of people, so I'm going to take a token. We each have a token now. And I think also that we should maybe look and see what moves from the setting happen here. Are
you going to make a move from the gossip and reputation playbook?
Yeah, so I think that what I do is I throw up my hands and I say, well, this is outrageous, and in particular, Golda, now that you've revealed that you're a woman, I can't be here alone with you. That's outrageous, and I have great sympathy for you, but the idea that you seek to marry my son when you've thrown everything away like this, I can't imagine what you're thinking. I storm out, apparently abandoning my parlor to you because I'm so overwhelmed. And at that moment, you notice that in the other room, there's only 2 rooms in this house. There's the parlor, and then there's the other room. And you hear a creak from the other room, from the kitchen, which apparently is not as empty as we both thought it was.
Does the scene end there, or
no? I think we should continue because there's because Avram, who is my son, is actually in the kitchen, has been overhearing this conversation. What do you do?
Oh, I think Golda is definitely going to creep towards the kitchen. She's been trained as a soldier. She picks up on this noise right away. And she draws her weapon, which is a regular move.
What weapon does she draw?
It's an unloaded pistol because I didn't take the loaded pistol as something I brought back. They don't know that, though.
Right. So there in the kitchen is Avram, who is looking at you with great intense wonder and shock.
As I draw the weapon on him accidentally?
His eyes widen when you draw the weapon. And he's like, he says, Bear, Golda, Bear, what? I don't understand.
There's definitely this moment of hesitation with Golda as she lets the gun drop to the floor. And I'm going to spend one of my tokens to make the move to say that this moment where we're staring at each other, that's the moment where I definitely fall in love with him. It's not just a crush anymore.
Right. Excellent. That's terrific.
That was Dream Apart. Ben, if people are looking for more about Dream Apart or more about your game design, where can they find you online?
Well, we are currently having a Kickstarter. That's pretty exciting. The URL is at Kickstarter.com, projects Avery Alder, Dream Askew, Dream Apart. Pretty easy to find on Kickstarter. I am on Twitter at Ben_Rosenbaum, and also on Facebook as Benjamin Rosenbaum. And my site is benjaminrosenbaum.com, which at the moment is mostly devoted to my fiction writing, but I will, begin to have certainly a link to the Kickstarter soon. At buriedwithoutceremony.com, that's Avery's site, has a page for both Dream Apart and Dream Askew and links to the Kickstarter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on today, Ben. You've been an amazing guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.